And we're really excited to have everybody here to learn a little bit more about some of the current and future volunteer opportunities at APGO. As I mentioned, I'm Molly Georgakis. I'm the Executive Director of APGO, and it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker and President Extraordinaire. Dr. Arthur Ohlendorf serves as the ACGME Designated Institutional Officer and Vice President of Academic Affairs for Carilion Clinic and is the Associate Dean of Graduate Medical Education and a Professor of OB-GYN and Health Systems and Implementation Science at Virginia Tech Carilion School of Medicine. His focus is improving quality of healthcare by creating clinical and academic partnerships, especially in medically underserved regions. He's the current president of the Association of Professors of Gynecology and Obstetrics and obstetric co-chair of the Virginia Neonatal Perinatal Collaborative, where he co-leads a project focused on substance use disorder in the maternal newborn dyad. Prior to moving to Virginia, Dr. Ohlendorf served as the ACGME Designated Institutional Officer at Mountain Area Health Education Center in Asheville, North Carolina, the Women's Service Line Leader at Mission Hospital in Asheville, the Western Region Physician Champion for North Carolina Medicaid's Pregnancy Medical Home Program, and the clinical lead for maternal projects for the Perinatal Quality Collaborative of North Carolina. He has previously held faculty appointments at the University of Cincinnati and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Arthur Ohlendorf.
Oh, thanks, Molly. So that introduction was probably helpful for maybe two things. I am the current president of APGO, which is why I'm here. But also, as you kind of hear the discussion, I'm a quality improvement person. And I think what you're going to hear about today is how we're trying to do this call and other things as a quality improvement project. How do we make things more transparent and more equitable as we look for volunteers? So I do welcome you to join the call and listening to what we do, because volunteerism is so important in any organization, APGO not being an exception to that. And this is really an opportunity for you to learn a little bit about what's going on, but also be able to ask questions. And I think we have a perfect number of people where questions can be asked in safe spaces and get good answers. Please enter your questions that you may have during the course of our very brief presentation in the chat function. Mary Ann's monitoring the chat, and that way we can make sure everyone's questions are answered, because some of you might be in difficult places to actually speak, as is true at noon in many places we work. I think we also have to sort of own that this has been important for us, because this transparency and this very open process is something that actually got uncovered really through our DEI efforts. When we really started to figure out how do we make an equitable and inclusive environment, part of it is how do we get people involved in the organization and how do leadership positions get decided. And this is part of that transparency aspect that we identified as being a really important thing. And we recognize that it's so important that our APGO members are developing the products and tools that are used by members. And, you know, the more inclusive, the more diverse that group is, the better. And it helps drive innovation and move what we do forward, because this is a member-based organization. We take feedback and we take things from our members, and then we try to present products to do that. And the committee structure is one way to do that. So kind of nuts and bolts are a couple of committees we're talking about that we have openings for right now. The board of directors, and I will represent the board of directors as the president and the president of the board. The Undergraduate Medical Education Committee, or UMEC, and Helen Morgan is here, who is the chair of UMEC. And the Surgical Education Faculty Scholars Advisory Committee. I don't think Dr. Sutton was able to make it, but I am the past co-chair of that. That is how I got involved in leadership of APGO, so I can very much talk about that program. I just rotated off 3 months ago. It hasn't changed much in the last 3 months, I do not believe. So we will have other opportunities coming soon, so keep checking the APGO website, and those will come out. The process will not be very different, but obviously the specific roles and questions that may come up, you can always reach out to us, you know, through social media or through email, should you have other questions. So with that, and I think we have two of the committee member chairs here, me and Dr. Morgan. We'll just start really quickly, and I'll let Helen start. In about a minute or less, just explaining how volunteering in APGO has impacted you. I'll let you go first, I'll go second, and then we'll get more into the nitty-gritty stuff.
Great. Well, it's wonderful to see so many of you. It's a rainy afternoon here in Michigan, but I have had the privilege of being on UMEC for 7 years now. This will be my last year coming up. It's an 8-year term. So for 6 years, I was a member, and I'm in my first year of being the chair of the committee. And it has been such a privilege and an honor. It's a wonderful group of humans. Out of all of the different volunteer opportunities for APGO, it's definitely one that is the most significant time commitment. I know that some of the questions are about whether the meetings were in person or virtual, and it's a mix of both, but the in-person components are an important part of being in UMEC. But it has been a wonderful source of camaraderie, support, scholarship, and I've learned so much from the group. So I'm excited to chat with all of you further about it.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. And and for me as both a member of the board now, as a board member, I was secretary treasurer before becoming president, probably about 6 or 7 years now, but also being part of SES, Surgical Education Scholars, in its different iterations, maybe for 10. One is I recognize the importance of rotating off, let others be involved. The pandemic changed a bunch of things, but we're getting back to, we get more people in, that's the value, getting new ideas and fresh ideas into the groups. And then we're really committed to doing that. And it's hard for some of us because we really love what we do. I could do surgical scholars forever. I mean, I will miss it in September. I will be very sad when I know they're all meeting, and teaching 25 scholars is really cool things. I won't be there, but that's also a really good thing because it makes me realize that APGO is a pretty strong organization and will continue to move forward. But I think the volunteer opportunities, you just meet so many good people. I mean, that's how I met Helen. That's how I met some of my best colleagues in Ob-Gyn I've met through APGO. Nancy Gaba, who's the co-chair with Surgical Scholars. We text about baseball like every other day because we become friends and colleagues. And when I have issues, when I was looking to change jobs, I was using her as a resource. Like, hey, I'm thinking about moving from Asheville to Roanoke. What do you think? And she became this great resource when I met through APGO and doing these things together. I think we're also trying to do that, trying to meet people where they are, because, and I think Helen said that, UMEC is a very big time commitment because just of the sheer amazing and volume of work that they do. The board of directors is a little bit different. It's a lot of a mental energy. We engage the board throughout the year with different questions. We only physically meet twice, but there's an emotional energy and there's sort of a knowledge that we want to kind of use from that group. And I would say Surgical Scholars is a little bit different. There's more of a distinct time commitment. We do have face-to-face meetings with the scholars twice a year, and it's 4 times over 18 months. We have faculty meetings where we're looking at the curriculum and trying to make the curriculum better. So we probably meet every other month, every third month to do that. And as we get closer to meetings, we tend to meet a little bit more closely just to arrange things. So there's definitely a different time commitment to that. I would, a little bit different than UMEC. I think if I was ranking them by the sheer amount of hours of, face-to-face time, it would go UMEC, drop, SES, small drop, board, if you're looking at strict time. But I think it's the expertise and your mental energy that's also really important in how we engage you. And there may be quick questions, but hey, what do you guys think about this? We do that for the board all the time. Someone's asked us to sign on to this document about medical education. Should we do it? Please respond. So it's a little bit of hit and miss, but I think we're really looking at that, the knowledge and the experiences that you bring for whatever opportunity that presents itself. So, but clearly rewarding for me, but obviously very biased, because if I didn't say that as the president of APGO, I either made a wrong decision or they made a wrong decision. And I hope neither of those are true. So with that, what questions do you guys have? I mean, put them in the chat, or we may have enough people if you feel like, doing the raise hand function, and, this is really an opportunity for you to learn more. Or if Molly has some questions from the previous survey that we can discuss, that's great too.
I do have some questions, but before I begin with some questions, I just wanted to add a little bit of detail to some of what you already stated. For example, we have the call for board applications out now. And I just wanted to highlight for folks on this Zoom and anybody who might be watching this later that we have a student position on the board of directors, a medical student position. It's not lost on me that a lot of you are probably well positioned to know great students that you think might be good representatives on the board of directors. The idea is to, focus on, one of our key constituencies, and to make sure that what we're doing as an organization is taking into consideration, their thoughts, what they're dealing with, and that kind of a thing. So if you have a student that you think would be great, if you could work with them on an application or speak with them about whether they're interested at least, that we would really appreciate it. With that, I'm happy to, well, actually, we have a good question here in the chat we'll start with. Would it be appropriate for a junior provider to be a member of UMEC?
So I can take that question. Maybe I will start with maybe like a 2 or 3 sentence description of kind of the roles and responsibilities of the UMEC group in order to answer that. So I think many of you are aware of kind of bits and pieces, so I can kind of provide a little bit of an overview. So our UMEC group, we are able to do a number of things. One of the things that's our main responsibility is to every year hold the Clerkship Director School 101, 201, which happens at the Faculty Development Seminar, and then 301, which happens during the CREAG-APGO annual meeting. And so, most of the people who attend Clerkship Director School are new Clerkship Directors, but some of them have been Clerkship Directors for a while and want a refresher, especially for 301. Other responsibilities, we revamp and create resources for Clerkship Directors to use. I think many of you are very well aware of the medical student objectives or the effective preceptor series or the basic skills curriculum. So those are all kind of under our purview as well. And then the last thing that we do is to create scholarship, to create papers on some of the hotter topics in Ob-Gyn Med Ed. So I think that we have had people who are fairly junior, but at the same time, it's helpful to have experience that can inform creating content for Clerkship Director School. If you're new to it yourself, it'd be a little bit more challenging to know kind of what Clerkship Directors need. Similarly, I think many of us have done, it's not a requirement, many of us have done the APGO Scholars and Leaders program and then done UMEC, because the Scholars and Leaders program provides a little bit of a base curriculum for leadership, for educational scholarship that's very helpful for a UMEC member. So I think that it's something that you can definitely consider, and many people do apply more than once to make it into UMEC. And so I hope that addresses the question.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that, I think, really what we're looking for is, do people have sort of the skills and traits that we need to be part of any of the groups? Sometimes it'll be because you've shown that in APGO, but it may be other ways you've shown it. You may be involved in other national organizations or had leadership roles or curriculum development roles in your own institution. So I think that's really what we're looking for. And sometimes, ASL is a good example. Academic Scholars and Leaders is a great program. And I think a lot of people naturally gravitate towards UMEC from that, but it doesn't mean you couldn't be doing surgical skills, or if you did, some national programs like ELAM or something, that'd be another way that you've actually shown that leadership development, also that curricular skills development. So I think any way that exists, and I think it's really important as Molly puts in the criteria. I mean, we're looking for specific ability, skills, attitudes, and behaviors, and any way those are, shown in the work that you have done. Even if you're relatively junior, great. I mean, there's some people there who've had great experiences, and this is not a situation where you have to be, like some organization, I won't name any, but you can't do this until you've been in this position for blank number of years. That is not the approach we're taking. We're just looking for people's skills that can come from a variety of sources, including within APGO, or sometimes outside of APGO. And we're excited to see that. I would say surgical scholars is the same thing. Surgical scholars, you don't have to be a high volume surgeon. We have a mix of people on the surgical scholars faculty and advisory group. Some are GYN oncologists, some people are high volume urogynecologists, some are educators that have more of an education background, but also do surgery. And that, we realize that it's the whole amalgamation of that group that's important. So, I mean, right now we have 2 people that are more educators and less surgeons. We have a couple people that are high volume, minimally invasive surgeons, GYN oncologists, someone that does gender reassignment surgery, which is incredibly involved and brings a certain skill set. So, it's not a certain phenotype that we're looking for. We're looking to have a broad group of people on these committees And people will bring different skill sets to the table. So, look at the call, look at for the skills that we're asking for, and then show that you have those skills. And then we're open to, we want those skills. That's how we live and how we thrive and survive.
I'm going to keep going with a couple of sort of eligibility type questions. I think that these all kind of fall into the same category. What happens if I would like to volunteer on a committee, but my coworker is already on that committee?
I think part of what we're trying to do is increase diversity, and I think, and sometimes it's also location. So it's not a exclusion, but I think as we consider trying to get, we live in a big country and we have lots of different perspectives. We like having people with different perspectives, but some people also have incredibly amazing skill sets. And I would say, I'll just use the board of directors. On our board of directors, we have duplicated institutions represented for a variety of reasons, some because it was recent moves, for other reasons. So it's not an exclusion, but it's also, we don't want to have everybody come from a certain medical school either. We want, or a certain institution, we want to see that diversity of experiences and approaches. But sometimes, it's not an exclusion by any stretch, but it's something we do consider because we're looking at diversity in the broadest sense, including, where you currently work and practice. I don't know, Helen, if you want to add to that and how UMEC considers that.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. It's something where if you have somebody, please still apply. It is not part of our rubric necessarily that you can't have somebody from the same school or institution.
Yeah, and if you aren't selected, and that's one of the calculations, you'll know the process and perhaps get some feedback on your application. So I think that can also be helpful in terms of eventually being on a committee that is, the one that you want to participate in. And anything else to add on that?
No, I think, I think that's a good point. I mean, some of these committees are highly sought after, and we get a fair number of applications of all very qualified people. So there's always a disappointment when one does not receive it the first time. But it doesn't mean you can't apply a second or third time, because sometimes different skill sets are needed. The lens has changed. Different projects are being looked at where, the things that you bring to the table might be more valued. But I think we're also looking for ways organizationally, how to get more people involved. So we have, we have 2 very active task force right now that are time limited, 6 months, one's looking at comprehensive reproductive health education and post-obs, and really talking to people in states with restrictions about what they need, and being assisted by those that have lots of resources. So that's something we can share. We also have a member engagement work group looking at, how do we engage certain parts of our educational community that may have not been as supported in APGO or other committees, like vice chairs of education, those who teach in rural areas, those who teach in non-traditional academic health centers, like I currently do, for example, or I definitely did in Asheville, and other groups that we haven't met. So I think we're trying to find different ways of getting people involved, and these committees tend to be a little more work, but there are also going to be other opportunities that require your expertise and your energy and your knowledge, but may not be quite as time intensive, because we're always matching time and effort, because we also have daytime paying jobs.
Yeah, and to sort of piggyback on that, if you you really have only a short amount of time to do anything other than what's already on your plate, there might be some opportunities like volunteering to judge the abstract submissions for the CREAG and APGO meeting, or even submitting the abstract for that meeting or the faculty development seminar, to just sort of start to put your foot in the water. So one last thing I'll just kind of say on that subject is that the liaisons for all of the committees are listed on the website. So if you had some questions as you were considering an opportunity, feel free to reach out to any APGO staff that's listed as a liaison, and we will either answer your question or help get you the answer to your question. We're there to facilitate the work of the committee, and one of the most important things is making sure that we have robust applicants for pools for all of our groups. So well, there were a couple of questions about time commitment, and I think you already got that one taken care of.
There's a question in the chat.
Oh,
So, and it says for those who may not be, do you take into account if people have applied multiple times to be on APGO committees? Does it help to first do the APGO faculty development seminar to be considered? I would say kind of yes and no. Sometimes we know, like if you applied in successive years with the same leadership, we know that, but it's not like we have a master list of how many times people applied. I mean, I don't think I know for SCS, we never had that, but once again, there's an institutional memory. You get people on those committees for 6 years. So like, yeah, I remember they applied before, didn't they? So it's not like a formal way, but I think we do understand, if people have applied, that's a great way of showing interest and we understand that. Being involved in APGO helps, right? There's not a formula or a rubric, but I mean, part of a leadership role, especially in APGO, is understanding the organization. And one way to understand the organization is participating in the organization by presenting at FDS or attending FDS or being a long-term member or even a short-term member, and showing that connection to APGO in whatever way that you have. So, I mean, going to FDS and saying, I've been in, in your cover letter, I've gone to FDS, I go to the meetings, I've been involved, I've been a poster presentation judge, I've done a moderated a session. I think those are things that really help us understand the commitment to the organization as well as the work, because they're both important. But I would say, is the strict requirement to do anything? No, but I think it's showing sort of a body of work of commitment to the organization, and that can be shown in a lot of different ways. Helen, I don't know if UMEC has a slightly different approach to that.
I think, and Marianne or Molly, please correct me. I think we do track people who've applied more than once to UMEC, just so that we know. There's the institutional memory, but we do understand how much of a commitment it is to apply and then reapply. So I think we are given that information. We do look to see if you have attended FDS and how regularly you've attended it, the faculty development seminar, because again, it's showing that you kind of know what FDS is and are aware of kind of the principles and the objectives of our different meetings. It helps as we're thinking about things. Yeah, and Marianne just put in, we do keep track of that.
Yeah, and I would say we loosely track it for the board too. I've only been here since 2018, but since then we've been tracking it because, as we said, there are a lot of reasons why a person might not be on the slate of candidates for the board, and some of that has to do with the other people and where they live and the geography and the other aspects of diversity. So I would say the one positive about applying to something multiple times or presenting at a meeting or any of those things is that people are going to know your name, and that name recognition can help members on a nominating committee or somebody to really understand that you're around and you are committed to the organization, and you're kind of a in the med ed sphere, in a way that people recognize and understand. So I think it doesn't hurt to sort of be in some of these multiple places and get that name recognition as well. Brandy said, if we're trying to get more of our physicians overall involved in APGO, you mentioned judging abstracts, etc. Are those opportunities that come via email or newsletter, other opportunities for people just starting to get involved? Yes, we typically send notices about those kind of things out through our newsletter. There may be other things. If you're an APGO member, you may just be getting like member emails and things like that. Anything that we do a call for is publicized on the website.
Right, but it's a call. It's not like, I pick my 10 friends to see who judges.
Right.
I mean, it is a public call and we need as many people as possible. So, we are always looking for people to do that. But yeah, I mean, the ones I've received have always been by email, like a bulk email, and we're looking for volunteers. If you're interested, click this, and it's either like a, Microsoft form or something where you just put in what you're interested in, but if there's a need to be more transparent or more obvious about that, that's good feedback to get from you guys, because we want to fix that, because we do want to make it an opportunity to volunteer very clear in the request that everyone gets it and the responsibilities that are part of it. And we'll just be sure that we are thoughtful that we're getting it out to the widest audience possible of APGO members, for sure.
Yeah, and we would ask people to forward it on to colleagues that you think would be good for things as well, because we realize there may be some people who either are not current members of APGO or just aren't dialed into the publications. Maybe everything goes to their junk folder, or they just don't have time. They're just not used to combing through our materials. So, as Marianne put in the chat, we also publish all of our opportunities in the CD listserv, clerkship directors listserv. That's another place to look for them. Helen, this is another question for you. Could you speak about how much which pieces should be included in the teaching portfolio for the UMAC application?
Sure, and I will answer that question indirectly. Again, I think that's going to be my theme for today, because we keep kind of referencing that UMAC is a significant time commitment, and so maybe I can kind of describe a little bit about what makes up some of the time commitment, and that can indirectly answer the question about what should be included in your teaching portfolio. Because to me, it was a little abstract too of what exactly is all this work that UMAC is doing. I kind of think I understand, but for clerkship director school, there'll be some sessions that we do every year, and those, you just look at somebody's PowerPoint and revamp them. But we are, as Arthur mentioned, we are constantly thinking about what are the important hot topics, where are the gaps that clerkship directors need. And so that's where it's very helpful to have members of our team who are like, this is something I've been working on in my institution about, let's say, for example, bias in assessments. This is something I've been working on. And those kind of things that are in your teaching portfolio are helpful for us to see, because then we know that you're going to be able to come up with new ideas for what should we include in the clerkship director school 101, 201, and 301. We'll also, as you all know, we'll do sessions at CAM on, again, like hot topics in Ob-Gyn Med Ed. And so we want to see kind of what you're teaching, what kind of workshops you're doing, what kind of workshops have you been involved with locally or nationally. As part of teaching portfolios, there's also kind of comments on how the learners evaluate you. And I think that's helpful too, because that's obviously something that educators are always thinking about. How am I evaluated by my learners? And so I think part of the cycle of work that is UMAC is there's always kind of just a bunch of big deadlines coming up of, I need my slides in by this time for clerkship director school. And I volunteered to be the middle author on this paper that needs to get reviewed and sent to the authorship group. And I also agreed to work on creating survey questions for the annual clerkship director survey. And Marianne and her team need those by December. And so it's like this cadence of kind of to-do things, and then oh shoot, CAM's coming up next month and I need to make sure I have all my slides and get ready for that. So it's just like a regular cadence of work to do. First when you're a junior member of UMAC, and then when you're one of the senior members of UMAC, you're kind of leading these efforts and making sure that clerkship director school 301 as a whole is organized and ready for the group to review, or if you're responsible for FDS, kind of reviewing all the abstracts and all of those things. And so to answer your question, we want to know what you're involved with at your home institution, what you're involved with regionally and nationally. And those are the items that we'd like to see in the teaching portfolio. And I hope that helps, Allison. If there's anything I missed, please let me know.
And having never been a member of UMAC, but having been very impressed and awed by the work UMAC does, one of the consistent qualities of UMAC members is organizational skills. Every UMAC member I've ever met for the last 15 years has been a very organized person to be able to balance all these things. So something I've just noticed, not a requirement, but it's probably a skill set for success in everything we do, but especially adding this or any other, committee and volunteer job to your dossier, so to speak. One of the other questions we also got, and I'll sort of bring that up now because it actually feeds in very nice to what Helen just said, is how do I add volunteering for APGO to my CV to be recognized for it? I think, some things become more obvious, I think, and I'll let Helen talk more about it, but when you're taking authorship of, a paper, or you're leading a session, that's clearly going to be able to be shown in your CV. But, even as a member of surgical education scholars faculty or on the board, it depends a little bit on how you're appointment and tenure committee goes, but there are places for that. And I know that I've written a lot of letters for lots of APGO members lately. It's mostly because they're looking for significant contributions nationally to education. And so I, as the APGO president, goes, yes, this is someone who's been very involved. They're a board member, they're a UMEC chair, they're been very involved in surgical scholars. I think I've written at least 3 surgical scholars promotion letters in the last 3 years. So there's what is on the CV that also, depending on where you are in that cycle, especially going from associate to full professor, or if you're tenure track, those connections to national organizations become very important. And how you highlight that in your individual dossier depends a lot on school. I've gone through promotion in 3 different universities. It's all different, but I think it's definitely valued how to put it in there. I can't tell you, but should you put in there? Absolutely. And there are ways of doing it where you really have that national role, because this is a national teaching organization, and it should be highlighted. Helen, you see that a lot more just by the sheer volume of product UMEC puts out. I don't know how people have indicated that in their CV and in their promotions.
Yeah, no, I think part of the nice byproducts of all the work that UMEC does is that there's a lot that gets added to your CV, because there's just so much work that you're doing. The one thing I wanted to add about what Arthur said about UMEC members being very organized, I completely agree. And what I'm also so impressed by always, they're organized and they have such high standards for themselves and for the group. There'll be sometimes there'll be something where I'll say, hey, we can just do the same thing as last year, but I'm always so impressed because the UMEC members always want to make it better, and they're always adding new references or updating it in an amazing way. And so I think that's part of the magic of the group.
Yeah, I think that's the magic a lot of APGO groups. Surgical scholars, I think in the last, great example for surgical scholars, when FLS came out, we didn't have FLS in the curriculum. We got FLS put into the curriculum with a national expert within 6 weeks. We're like, hey, FLS is starting. They just made the announcement. We found someone from GW who came, presented, and did a skills lab for our scholars within 6 weeks. So then they could use the first session so they can become those experts for their school. So, we have a lot of early adopters and people who like to adapt and adopt. And I think that's true for so many of the, UMEC for sure, ASL, SES, all the groups. It's a pretty common APGO character trait.
And I just noticed when I was looking at the questions that were submitted, I just want to make sure it's clear. So one of the time commitments of UMEC is that we have a summer meeting that's in person that will be in July, and that is from a Friday through a Monday. So it's Friday, Saturday, it's 4 days. And then you will attend faculty development seminar every year, and you'll come early because Clerkship Graduate School 101, 201 happens on the Saturday morning of FDS. And then you'll also attend the APGO annual meeting and also come early because we have Clerkship Graduate School 301. We also meet, our UMEC team meets during the FDS meeting and CAM. And so it's just it's a lot of time. And then we also have a virtual meeting in the fall where it's an evening time call where we touch base on all the different deadlines and how people are doing. So I think those are the like in-person and virtual, but then there's a lot of that work in between.
Right. And for the board of directors, we meet the day before the CAM meeting. So and then we have a separate for Thursday, Friday, Saturday board meeting in August, usually the last part of August. And then we'll have a couple of not webinars, but Zoom meetings just for important. We have one this week because we just have to do a budget thing. So there are a couple of PRNs for surgical scholars. We do have intermittent, meetings, that are web-based, but we have a 3-day meeting in September with the scholars. So that's a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, almost always in Annapolis, but not exclusively in Annapolis. And then we sometimes, well, the first one's in Annapolis typically, and we meet 2 days, a day and a half before CAM to do more teaching with the scholars. And then another September meeting. It's typically been at GW in DC at their Sim Center. We do our big simulation thing. Another Thursday, Friday, Saturday, typically in September. And then, meet the day before the next CAM. That's a cycle of SES. So a couple of days earlier before the APGO annual meeting, and then a couple of separate 3-day sessions usually in September.
Yeah, I would add that Marianne just dropped in the chat that each job description on the website should have some information about this, but certainly reach out to any of the staff here if you have any questions or need clarification on any of that. And I would just give one caveat, which is, as we know from the last few years, a lot of our best laid schedules went out the window with the pandemic and how in-person meetings at that time changed for us. So the leadership during those times pivoted to a lot of virtual meetings and at times that weren't necessarily anticipated. We're trying to get back to the regular schedule, but there's always the opportunity that we might need to meet about something or work on something just because of the world that we live in. So, I think when people apply for these positions and opportunities, just be aware that there has to be just a little bit of flexibility there too. All right, I'm getting the message. I think we're all getting it that we have 5 minutes left. Any other questions from the group that we want to answer in our remaining time? You can type it into the chat. You could unmute and ask it, whatever you're most comfortable with. Well, I would just say then if something comes up after this meeting, please be sure to reach out to any one of us, whether it's our presenters or staff. And Dr. Ohlendorf, if you could close us out, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I mean, I thank everybody for joining us and, listening to us. And, if you have colleagues who are interested, in the spirit of, yes, we're all competitive, but we also want to get the best people involved, tell them about what you learned. This will be recorded. So let them view the webinar. And I think, the more we can socialize the value of what we do and talk to our colleagues, it just gets better. And I think that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for how do we best serve our membership, but most importantly, how do we serve our learners? I mean, that's really what we're doing. And I would say even further is how do we serve our communities? For me, education is about how to serve communities and getting the right type of students and in all different situations into communities and improving the healthcare of populations is really what education does. And I think we do really important work. So the more people that are involved, the better. So talk to people, spread the word of the good work we do, and also get more people involved in APGO. They may not be ready for this, but tell them like, wow, I had this really good meeting about APGO and leadership. What a great organization. I want to find everyone's getting involved. And if you have different ways that we can get people involved, share them with us. We'd love to hear different ways of getting people involved at different levels of effort. Because we understand that we're still meeting people where they are because there are things that are going on in our lives, in our world, but we can gain from everybody. So I thank you so much for spending the time with us. We look forward to seeing your applications if you choose to do it now or maybe in a future application call. And obviously, I always have to thank, Molly, Marianne, Kelly, and the rest of the staff of APGO who really make this all work. They're the true engines of our success.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.